Good morning, and today we're going to look at the life of Ernest Hemingway. Now, Ernest Hemingway was born July 21st, 1899, in Oak Park, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. He was the second of 6 kids, and his parents were Dr. Clarence Edmonds Hemingway and Grace Hall Hemingway. So in his early adulthood, at the age of 17, just as he's graduating from school, Hemingway wrote for the Kansas City Star. Now we find out the newspaper advocated short sentences, short paragraphs, active verbs, authenticity, compression, clarity, and immediacy. Everything we see today in Ernest Hemingway's actual writing. Shortly after this, he also joins a volunteer ambulance unit in the Italian army in World War I. And unfortunately, Ernest Hemingway is wounded by fragments from an Austrian mortar shell, and he spends several months recuperating. Because he was wounded during World War I, Hemingway was awarded the Italian Silver Medal for valor. And so here we have pictures of Ernest Hemingway shortly after he comes home in World War I, as he has been injured and he's recuperating. Now, as he comes home and he's done recuperating, he feels a little restless. So Ernest Hemingway moves to Paris in his 20s as a foreign correspondent, this time for the Toronto Star. He becomes a member of a group of expatriate Americans in Paris, later called the Lost Generation by writer Gertrude Stein. We're not only going to see Gertrude Stein as one of his friends, but we're also going to see other American expatriates, Ezra Pound and F. Scott Fitzgerald, hanging out with Ernest. Now, Gertrude Stein also hosted many salons for other expatriates to discuss literature and the arts, and many of these are going to contribute to the American modern literary movement. Now, Ernest Hemingway is a man who thought he should be married, and fortunately or unfortunately, he tried at it several times. His first marriage comes shortly after World War I to Elizabeth Hadley Richardson, and they had a son, Jack Hemingway, in 1923. Now, his second marriage happens immediately after his first divorce, and that's to Pauline Pfeiffer. They had 2 sons, Patrick Hemingway in 1928 and Gregory Hemingway in 1931. And then about the time of World War II, when Hemingway wants to go off to war, he divorces Pauline and immediately marries Martha Ellis Gellhorn. But then he becomes a changed man at the end of World War II, and he divorces Martha and then marries Mary Welsh Monks from 1946 to 1961. And so here we have pictures of Hemingway with all of his families. As we near the end around 1961, we see that the Hemingways are settling in Ketchum, Idaho, but Ernest's health begins to deteriorate, partly due to his heavy alcohol abuse. Now, he's admitted to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota for his mental health and was given shock treatments, and from this, he begins to experience memory loss. After his memory loss, he becomes unable to write like he used to, and it might be this that leads to his July 2nd, 1861, shooting himself in the head and committing suicide. The novels of Ernest Hemingway, he's quite a prolific writer, but some of the more popular ones that we're going to see, one of his first ones is known as The Torrents of Spring, but his first popular successful novel is in 1926, The Sun Also Rises. In 1929, we get the World War I epic of A Farewell to Arms, and he continues on with For Whom the Bell Tolls in 1940. Now, post-World War II, we start moving away from army and military-type novels into The Old Man and the Sea in 1952. Shortly after this, we get a Nobel Prize and other prizes in literature for his writing. And in 1964, after his death, we have the posthumous A Movable Feast. He's also quite well known for his short stories, several of which you'll notice are in a lot of American literature texts. You might read The Short Happy Life of Francis Macomber, The Snows of Kilimanjaro, A Clean Well Lighted Place, Cat in the Rain, The Big Two-Hearted River, and hills like white elephants. Now, for Hemingway's awards and accomplishments, shortly after Old Man and the Sea is published in 1952, he wins the Pulitzer Prize in 1953, and then the year later, he gets a Nobel Prize for all of his literary works. At the same year, in 1954, he also receives the American Academy of Arts and Letters Award for Merit. So when we talk about the modern American literature movement and how Ernest Hemingway was part of the lost generation that were American expatriates over in Paris, he becomes one of the foremost authors of the era between the two world wars. And Hemingway in his early works depicted the lives of two types of people. One type consists of men and women who are deprived after World War I of faith in the moral values which they had once believed in, and are now living with cynical disregard for anything but their own immediate emotional needs. The other type that Ernest Hemingway writes about were men of simple character and very primitive emotions, such as prize fighters or bullfighters or fishermen. Hemingway wrote of their courageous and usually futile battles against their circumstances. Now, as for Hemingway's viewpoints in his stories, God did not exist and the universe is indifferent to humans. Now, the resulting world is hostile and muddled, and without God and faith, moral values are just meaningless to these characters. War, of course, is an example of this, and several of his most famous works deal with the sense of war. Now, we very quickly touched on Hemingway's writing style because when he was starting to write for the Kansas City Star as a teenager, they began to teach him a certain writing style that stuck with Hemingway throughout his life. A few characteristics of Ernest Hemingway's writing are a very stark, minimalist nature. You say what you need to say and get out of the paragraph. You have grade school-like grammar because of the characters that he likes to use. These characters are very primitive, almost simplistic, and therefore that's all you need for their grammar. He picks a very austere word choice when it comes to description. Hemingway does have description in his story, but there's so very little of it that leaves you to the imagination and also leaves Hemingway to give these very spare, very almost blank background drops. You have unvarnished descriptions of the characters themselves. They are definitely unique characters. You do have descriptions for them, but you're not going to dress them up so you have every little iota or detail about them. A lot of his sentences are written as short declarative sentences, just almost in a reporter type style of just the facts and just the events. And Hemingway also uses language accessible to the common reader. He wanted everybody to be able to understand and perhaps even like his particular stories. Now, a lot of people have put forth what is known as the Iceberg Principle of Hemingway's writing. His theory of omission in his writing is widely referred to this Iceberg Principle. By omitting certain parts of a story, he's actually strengthening that story. Now, the writer must be conscious of omitting parts of the story and be writing true enough in order for the reader to get a sense of what has been omitted. Now, when the reader senses the omitted parts, a greater perception and understanding for the story can be achieved. Hemingway gives just enough of a piece of a character for you to understand the rest. He'll give you just enough of a plot line for you to make inferences as to what is about to happen. Now, Hemingway disliked discussions regarding symbolism in his works. The Iceberg Principle, however, by its very nature, invites symbolic interpretations, and Hemingway acknowledged this in his own subtle way. Now, no good writer ever prepares his symbols ahead of time and writes their book about them, but out of a good book which is true to life symbols, those may arise and be profitably explored, if not overemphasized. So what are some of the famous words that Ernest Hemingway has left us? Well, when Ernest Hemingway was asked what was the most frightening thing he ever encountered, he answered, a blank sheet of paper. Now there are some things which cannot be learned quickly, and time, which is all we have, must be paid heavily for their acquiring. They are the very simplest things, and because it takes a man's life to know them, the little new that each man gets from life is very costly, and the only heritage he has to leave. More famous words from Hemingway, from The Old Man and the Sea. I am glad we do not have to try to kill the stars. Imagine if each day a man must try to kill the moon. The moon runs away. But imagine if a man each day should have to try to kill the sun. We are born lucky. Yes, we are born lucky. From his posthumous novel, A Movable Feast. You expected to be sad in the fall. Part of you died each year when the leaves fell from the trees and their branches were bare against the wind and the cold wintry light. But you knew there would always be the spring, as you knew the river would flow again after it was frozen. When the cold rains kept on and killed the spring, it was as though a young person had died for no reason. And in one of his short stories, A Clean Well-Lighted Place, Hemingway writes, Our nada, who art in nada, nada be thy name. Thy kingdom nada, thy will be nada, as it is in nada. Give us this nada our daily nada, and nada us our nada as we nada our nadas, and nada us not into nada, but deliver us from nada, pues nada. Hail nothing, full of nothing, nothing is with thee. In A Farewell to Arms. If people bring so much courage to this world, the world has to kill them to break them. So of course it kills them. The world breaks every one, and afterward many are strong at the broken places. But those that will not break, it kills. It kills the very good, and the very gentle, and the very brave impartially. Now, for a true writer, each book should be a new beginning where he tries again for something that is beyond attainment. He should always try for something that has never been done, or that others have tried and failed. Then, sometimes, with great luck, he will succeed. Ernest Hemingway in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech. Thank you so much for learning a little bit more about Ernest Hemingway with me. If you'd like to learn more about Ernest Hemingway's books, check out the other videos on my channel. I do have quite a few, especially from Old Man and the Sea. If I've missed any of his novels or short stories that you'd like me to cover, please leave a comment down below and let me know what you'd like me to cover. And as always, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed.